I'm sure I don't need to remind anyone here about Ms. Plame's background and the source of her expertise that comes through so well in this book. In Blowback, Plame uses her experience from the world of the CIA to create a complex heroine in Vanessa Pierson, as well as a thrilling plot. The book has received praise from many prominent writers in the genre, including David Baldacci, who said, "The opening scenes of Blowback are filled with a shattering realism that only someone like Plame, who has walked the walk and talked the talk, could inspire." So we are so glad she is here with us tonight to share her work. Please join me in welcoming Valerie Plame.
Go ahead. Why don't you take that off?
Hi, so I'm Laura Rozen. I did the reported afterword to Valerie's memoir from several years ago when a lot of the book was redacted by the CIA. So I noticed in the new book, which I loved, that there were no blacked out redactions, and wanted to ask if you didn't have to submit it to the CIA publication review for censorship or... Sure.
First of all, let me just say it's such a delight to be here. I see a lot of friends in the audience, and it means a lot. Thank you very much for coming. It's exciting for me. Thank you to Laura for agreeing to do this. Can I tell a little bit of background of how it came to pass? So with Fair Game, which came out in 2007, which was the memoir and really a catharsis for me of what happened, of course, I had to submit it to the CIA for their publication review. When you join the CIA, you sign a secrecy agreement, and you agree, of course, not to reveal sources and methods. I completely understand. But when it came back, they had redacted about 10% of it. And it is my position that it had nothing to do with actually concealing any sort of national security secrets, but rather there was still some political pressure come to bear on that. So my publisher at the time, Simon & Schuster, we were all, it was really a shattering episode, and I ended up suing the CIA on First Amendment grounds. But my publisher, David Rosenthal, suggested that they hire an investigative reporter to bring to life a lot of the things that I was not permitted to say. And he chose Laura Rozen, who's really good and who is one of the most, the smartest and the most voluminous tweeters I've ever met in real life. But she was the one who wrote the afterword, and you did a great job. We never met until there really was a firewall. And there's, of course, she did not sign a secrecy agreement. She went about her job as an investigative reporter. So that's what at the end, and that's where our friendship began. And I'm so happy that you're here this evening. So with Blowback, again, I needed to submit it to the CIA for their review, and I'm happy to say that there were no redactions. They understand it's a fictionalized account, obviously informed by my experiences, but there's no black lines through it.
But it seemed very deeply informed by your experiences in some way, like an inner life of a very familiar character came through, even of their parents and brother, in a way that seemed quite familiar to me.
Yeah, that would seem familiar as you looked into my family background. So Vanessa Pierson is the heroine, and the genesis of it, for me anyway, was I really wanted to show a female CIA ops officer that wasn't just a paper doll, right? They're either highly sexualized or there's too much physicality. And in ways, they're shown to be a prop or a victim, and it's just eye-rolling to me. So I wanted to create this character that was much more realistic, but also entertaining. And of course, I drew on my own background. She comes from a military family, as I do, a brother who's in the Marines, and there are some similarities.
Vanessa is a good shot, and I remember hearing from your colleagues at the farm that you were also quite good.
How about that?
One of the interesting things from the novel that comes through, and also other spy novels I love by former case officers, is how people who are very good field agents often get chewed up by the bureaucracy, if they don't have intelligence by their husband that's being disputed by Dick Cheney. And can you talk a little bit about that? The blowback very much is about someone who's, excellent at tracking the nuclear arms dealer, Victor Boot, or Boot, A.Q. Khan, who's on the verge of getting fired, it seems. So
I think anyone that goes to work in operations with CIA signs up. Certainly as I did, one of the great lures was the fact to live and work overseas. I mean, I thought, how great is this? The government's going to pay me to live and work overseas. I came from a family where public service was considered something worthwhile. My dad fought in World War II. He was an Air Force officer. My brother was a Marine and wounded in Vietnam. My mother was a public school teacher. So when I was given this opportunity to serve my country and do something that I thought was really interesting and go overseas, because I traveled a lot growing up with my folks overseas, I thought, how lucky am I? And I love my career. So yeah, and then you talk, the central part of the book revolves around something that I'm passionate about, and I developed my expertise in the CIA on nuclear proliferation. So we are looking in the book at a secret Iranian nuclear facility. And of course, that's an issue of the moment.
And do you have any opinion on the new leadership in Iran? And do you have any hope for a prospective nuclear deal with them?
Of course I have an opinion. Doesn't mean I know anything, but I always have an opinion. Well, I really am heartened that there is some diplomatic dialogue. This is the first at this level between President Obama and President of Iran, Rouhani. At this level, the first in over 30 years since the revolution. And just think about with your friends that maybe you haven't spoken to for a couple weeks or a couple months or a couple years, and the possibility of miscommunication or misperception or what did they mean by that email goes up exponentially. So it's the same thing between nation states. I don't think diplomatic relations should be reserved for sort of favorite nation status. I mean, I think America is strong enough and great enough that we can speak to our friends and enemies alike. So I'm really heartened, and certainly Rouhani, who is tweeting, Happy Rosh Hashanah to all his Jewish followers. There is clearly a moderation in tone, and maybe we have a little window of opportunity. So I think they are meeting in Geneva on the 15th, and clearly Iran would like to rejoin the community of nations. The sanctions are biting. I always felt this was some time ago when I was working for the CIA, but I always thought, this is before Stuxnet, I always thought that if we could just get in pirated copies of Baywatch into Iran, they'd be like, oh, the West, amazing what they do there. And but you do need to over 50. What is I should know this? 40 to 50% of the population of Iran is under 25. They really, and the leadership definitely does not want to continue with any sort of protests in the street. So we may have an opportunity, a moment in time, to actually make progress on this.
We were talking a little bit back there about the character of David Khoury, who's the illicit CIA officer, love interest of Vanessa Pierson in this novel, of Lebanese descent. And much like the protagonist, Vanessa gets in trouble with the CIA precisely for the reason he's hired, because of these connections. Can you talk this is also ripped from the headlines. I've seen cases like this.
Yes. So David Khoury, he is a composite character, as all of them are, people I've met and along the way. But this character was born in Lebanon, and his parents left to escape the civil war. His parents are intellectuals. And he went to Harvard. So in many ways, all-American boy, but a little different. Muslim, and speaks, as you can imagine, French, Arabic, and English perfectly. And he's hired, as Laura said, by the CIA for all those qualities. And, not to mention his his family back home and network, but he falls under suspicion. And the reason why their love affair is under a cloud. They met at the farm which is what the CIA calls its training facility, and there was immediate sparks. But the reason why their love is illicit, I love that word, is that Vanessa is a non-official cover officer, NOC officer, so no USG affiliation, whereas David is also an ops officer, but he is under official cover. For obvious reasons, it would compromise either one of their covers if they were holding hands in some foreign capital. But they do anyway.
I did notice, even when I was researching the book, that some of the former CIA station chiefs, I had to basically rely on people I knew to try to tell me something about Valerie. And so knows someone who was the station chief when Valerie was, as I was told, a young officer in Athens, before I think you became a NOC, according to what I was told. But there was a lot of sexism, and people, a lot of the men tend to think that, so-and-so was just promoted because of X, or someone was just, as you told an interviewer recently, was just a secretary by the time that your identity got outed. Why is there so much, you think, sexism in the CIA among people whose lives are dedicated to getting at the truth?
I'm not sure they're mutually exclusive, but well, as certainly in this crowd in the heart of Washington understands, the CIA came out of the OSS, which many had called Oh-So Social Club, and it was Office of Secret Security, Secret Service. And it really was an old boys club for many decades of its history, where there was the tap on the shoulder from your Ivy League professor. And women specifically hired for operational roles were not hired into those ranks really until the mid-'80s, specifically to go into operations, rather than, say, a really smart secretary who got tired of typing up letters and wanted to do more. So there, like any institution in America, there continues to be a certain amount of sexism and a bias, but many people are a lot smarter about that now, so it's not quite so overt, but it still exists. But I think it's, for me, I tended not to think about what I could not be successful at, but rather pursue what I would be good at. I mean, look at me. I'm obviously not going to infiltrate Hezbollah, Who's that blonde girl over there? So but you go after where you can. And as I mentioned, I developed my expertise in nuclear proliferation, which is making sure that terrorists or rogue nation states do not acquire nuclear technology.
Well, should I turn it over for questions?
If you'd like.
Okay. Hold up your mic. Does anyone else want to ask questions? And can we go to the mics? There's one there and one there.
Hi, Valerie. So, what is it like for you to be back in Washington? I know you left and wanted to leave. It must be hard. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be back here, even for a wonderful book.
This is my dear friend Ellen Siegel and her husband Jerry. They were friends. We were instant friends in the darkest days, and to you, I'm very grateful. And if anyone knows Ellen and her work, she is a true force of nature. So people like Ellen and Jerry, and to all of my friends here this evening, I miss you terribly, but you can always come visit in New Mexico. What I will say is this is, it's been a decade. The outing of my CIA identity happened in July 2003, and there were some really tough times that we went through. And as everyone here can appreciate, there's sort of the unwritten rule that you can't leave town while you're in the middle of a scandal. So we couldn't leave. And but Joe and I one day did look at each other and we said, why are we still here? We didn't have jobs anymore, and we didn't have any family keeping us in the area. So the first time in our adult lives, really, we could decide where we wanted to go next, what would work for us and our family. And we chose New Mexico for a variety of reasons. It's a beautiful part of the world. So it is great to come back, but I can't say that. I put it this way: if I have 3 cars in front of me at the light in Santa Fe, I'm really irritated. Okay. So, yes. Hi.
Hi. I loved your testimony in the Senate, and I really admire you. 2 questions. One is, how did you get recruited? And the other question is, what do you think of the movie?
First, I'll say right before I left for New Mexico, and I stayed with my friends, the Seagulls, and Ella knows I was so nervous I was ready to fall out of my shoes before I testified. I had never really spoken publicly before, and it was so raw and so fresh for me. But I testified, and then I got on the plane the next day. So I am not going to, because I am not permitted to acknowledge publicly any CIA affiliation before 2002. So I just fell from the sky. You can ask Laura. But so I'll speak to the movie, which Fair Game, which came out in 2010. We were really pleased with it. I think it tells the essential truth of what happened. It was obviously condensed. If events were condensed. This was a story that waxed and waned over quite a period of time. So to make it into a movie, they needed to condense some of those events. But we were really proud of it and pleased with how it turned out.
One bit I'll add on that is I think your mother told me that she sent Valerie an ad for the CIA recruiting when you were in college in Pennsylvania.
Hi. So at the risk of people getting mad at me in this room, I am curious what you think of the argument that, the United States is, some might say, is a rogue state. And so there's this presumption that the countries that have nuclear weapons are in some way more capable of having them. So why are these other countries, what's the logic behind we can have them, they can't? I mean, I understand that some of these places may have more terrorists, but it seems like a difficult position to have.
Well, we're beholden to our history. We've had over half a century of the Cold War in a bipolar world and a doctrine, mutually assured destruction, MAD, which I love, that acronym, whereby, if you launch from the Soviet Union, if you launch nuclear weapons, we will retaliate and we'll wipe us both off. So, but as frightening as that was, at the height of the Cold War, there were about 70,000 nuclear weapons in the world. I can't even do the math to figure out how many times over that will destroy civilization. We are now down to about 15,000. The problem is, while that is a good news story, the problem is, of course, there are many more nuclear armed states. We're up to 9 declared. And the technology of nuclear weapons has spread far and wide, and we have the increase in terrorism. So that is why, when I worked at the CIA, I guess I was primarily really focused on operational things, if you will. I didn't really have the luxury to step back and think about it in a larger context. And I have evolved my views from where I was sort of delaying or subverting or diverting all of that while you hope saner heads and policymakers prevail to somehow continue to reduce our nuclear arsenal. I have evolved to the place now where I really believe you have to drain the swamp. I mean, you need to make that as your ultimate objective, 0 nuclear weapons. As we saw just recently, horrifically in Syria with the chemical weapons, there's a reason that it's called WMD, and that lumps together chemical weapons, biological, and nuclear weapons. Those images of women and children, nuclear weapons, just like chemical weapons and biological, kill indiscriminately the innocents as well as those that are on the field of battle. So we have managed, with, of course, terrible exceptions and anomalies like Syria, the world has kind of said, chemical weapons, bad idea, especially when the wind's blowing the wrong way. So there are protocols and treaties in place, and it is considered taboo. We are not quite there yet in nuclear weapons because it's considered, right, the big boys club. If you get one of those, as Pakistan they came out in the streets in the millions when A.Q. Khan, a Pakistani national, was able to make Pakistan, the Islamic bomb, and they were so joyful because it demonstrated to them a certain prestige. The problem is the world continues to go on. We're long beyond a bipolar world. Nuclear weapons, to use recent examples, did not stop what happened in Boston, did not stop Syria. And, and just yesterday at Capitol Hill, I mean, nuclear weapons do not keep us safer. And I know President Obama is personally very invested in this. He's got a long to-do list, right? But he has maybe some time off right now while the government's closed. I know he's thinking, of course, as a second-term president, he's thinking about legacy. And part of that, hopefully, will be to continue to work with the Russians and reduce the number of nuclear weapons. You can tell I feel passionately about it, but I have a mic in my hand, so watch out.
Hi, Valerie. I don't know if you remember me from the Family Mental Health Foundation, and it's just so great to see you again. And I wondered, this is kind of a different topic, but I remember you as such a loyal and dedicated volunteer for families and moms. And I was just curious if you're able to do that with such a high profile now, and if you miss that. And
thank you. This was something. We were involved with postpartum depression, which I went through. I had my twins in 2000 and kind of late in life. And I was educated and I had a very happy marriage and we had financial resources. And I thought, how hard can this be? And it brought me to my knees. It was devastating. And as a result of that experience, my empathy and understanding of mental health concerns, particularly around postpartum, skyrocketed. I continue to work where I can. And I will tell you, yesterday's incident, I won't say this on TV, but because we don't know, but it appears that the woman yesterday, when she was a woman, she was not armed, she had the child with her, and I just immediately thought there are things going on. So as we continue to deal with sort of on a regular basis of mass shootings that in the majority of cases we're dealing with someone that is really not well, and they've tried unsuccessfully to get help in the past. When are we going to get to the point where you have mental health assistance available to us that is so easy, and it's as easy as, I don't know, buying a gun in Walmart? When is that going to happen?
Oh, okay. Hi, Valerie. I'm a big fan of yours. I have a question about drone policy because, it's been in the news lately, and there's been a lot of controversy because the CIA had a lot of jurisdiction over it, and it seems to be moving over to the Pentagon now. So I don't know how much you can comment on that, but I was just curious what your take is of that.
The drone started with heavy CIA involvement for targeting, and in classic Washington bureaucratic fashion, when you start something and the budget grows astronomically, you're going to hang onto it very tightly. I'm glad to see. I think it should be more under the Pentagon. Another conversation of hours worth is talking about the morality of warfare and just war and so forth. But as just a citizen, I am concerned that, in fact, it is doing long-term strategic harm when you inadvertently kill innocents, wedding parties, and children you were doing strategic harm for tactical gain. And I know that the Pentagon has got to factor that in. Thanks.
I was wondering if you ever considered any other jobs besides the CIA when you were in college.
Well, hi, Sarah. I didn't grow up thinking that espionage was a viable career option. I didn't. I mean, I was one of those people who always knew what I didn't want to do rather than what I really did want to do. And as I mentioned, I always thought I wanted to do something in the international realm. I knew working for a corporation was not for me. And I feel fortunate that I was given an opportunity at the right time to serve my country and do something that was interesting. Thanks.
Can I follow up on that and ask, so you spent so much of your career chasing this arms dealer and nuclear proliferator, A.Q. Khan, who seems to inspire one of the characters in the novel. You can't read the newspapers possibly now without knowing what you know and seeing the world at the level you saw it. So I'm just curious how it affects your reading of the news and developments, even if you're not chasing him directly anymore, or people like that.
Well, two things. My husband and I were on the receiving end of a great deal of media, a lot of which painted a picture of us that I couldn't recognize. It had nothing to do with who we were or what our characters were. And what our values were. So certainly my skepticism level increased considerably. But yeah, when I just saw a story not too long ago about a man that was born in Iran but raised here in the United States. I think he was a naturalized U.S. citizen. He served in the military and was working for a defense contractor and went back to Iran. Did you see this? Yes. And he went back to Iran to visit his grandma, and he was thrown in jail as a spy. And it just, I don't know, the whole thing doesn't add up. And he had all this like kind of crazy pocket litter. That's the sort of story that makes me go, huh?
And following on that, I know you're working on other novels in this series of Vanessa Pierson. Have you any tips on what we should look for next?
As you mentioned, the villain that we've called Boot is inspired by A.Q. Khan, who is an amoral character and really a one-man nuclear entrepreneur who would sell nuclear technology to anyone with money. He's just recently, not too long ago, was released from house arrest in Pakistan over USG objections. He was very much involved in Libya at the time. If you recall, in December 2003, they were essentially caught red-handed trying to working on their nuclear program, and he was very much a central figure in that. So, yes, my co-author is Sarah Lovett, and she actually lives in New Mexico as well, and she's a very successful thriller writer. And we're working on our second book now when I go back home. And I think it'll be even better, truthfully, because I feel like, okay, now I get it. Now I'm getting underway. Let's go here and there.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you want to answer this, but the previous administration performed such a ruthless personal attack against you. And I'm just wondering, how do you get over that? Have you ever gotten over that? Will you ever get over that? And I don't know, what are your feelings about that?
It seems it was a decade. So there's a lot of time and distance. And as I mentioned, we've just rebuilt our lives. It was strange, when Joe and I see now that when scandals break out and various things you see, and it seems like 24 hours later, they have a PR person, and this is so foreign to us and what's out there in the social media world. Thank goodness that wasn't really underway. It would have been even worse at that time. Joe and I basically white knuckled it, and it was a day-to-day survival. We had small children, looking out for their welfare, and thanks to friends that I have here this evening, Melody Miller, Bill Wilson, and the Seagulls, that showed, their friendship was gold. The people that step up and say, we know who you are, even though you're being called a liar and a traitor and accused of nepotism and so forth. So, yeah, thanks. Hi.
Hi. My niece has two twins, 10-year-olds, who'd love to be just like you. Anything in your book that's objectionable for a 10-year-old? And what books did you read as a kid that got you interested in stuff like this?
No, my husband made sure that the romantic scenes are really kind of digestible. Put it this way, my 13-year-old son read it this summer at camp, and he liked it. And he's pretty squeamish about, a kiss on screen or anything like that. And so that my kids are really, it's really hard to impress them with what their parents do. So the fact that he liked it was a good story.
About your career choice, I grew up in the 60s and 70s where the CIA had a very different reputation. I do think things have changed with the Cold War, and I couldn't think of anything, more noble than trying to eliminate nuclear weapons. But when we thought CIA, we thought overthrowing of Chile or in Iran, or I don't have to go into it. So how did that factor in your career choice? I mean, really, we thought very negatively about the CIA.
I understand. I'm not going to defend their record on many things, but until we hold hands and sing, I'm going to believe that I have to believe that a strong intelligence service is necessary. Just what I was talking about earlier about the diplomatic overtures with Iran. That has to be complemented by good intelligence, by people that are smart and dedicated, and many on furlough right now, but they go to work anonymously every day, making a pretty modest government salary, and they really are trying to make the world safe for democracy. And those activities should complement and go in tandem with the more overt diplomatic communications. So I'm obviously biased, but I think human intelligence can be a force for good as well as for evil.
Can you tell me if the NSA is reading our email, by the way?
I've now taken, I think I'll put in my signature block. Thank you, NSA, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Plame. It's an honor to speak to you, but I was just wondering, since I know a lot of your experience is in nuclear proliferation, and with all the nuclear stuff... Oh, sorry. This is the problem with being tall. But so with all the nuclear stuff missing in Russia and how more nations are becoming nuclear, as you said, how high do you think the risk is? Like, how real is the chance that a terrorist organization will actually obtain nuclear weapons?
Did everyone hear that question? Okay, so, how real is the risk that a terrorist organization would get nuclear weapons? I think we've just been lucky, really. Incidents happen with much too much regularity where there was just miscalculation or we just missed something. I'm now involved in an organization called Global Zero. And what I really admire about them, they have brought together people from all over the world, people like Queen Noor and Tony Blair and Gorbachev and Musharraf. Michael Douglas has been very involved with them as well. And then from that sort of level of celebrity down through diplomats and people in the military and students saying, we cannot continue the way we are. This is simply... it's only, the human race is nothing but a continual race between education and catastrophe. And it is something that, for instance, South Africa took themselves off that path. And they said, we don't want to do that. So there are some precedents for doing it. To my mind, I think a country like Pakistan, which is essentially a country that is imploding, and is deeply infiltrated in its security services by al-Qaeda and others that mean harm to the West and the United States. their command and control of their nuclear arsenal is sketchy at best. That I find terrifying. I mean, truly. And that's what Global Zero is working toward, to try to continue to get nation states to say, these are no longer keeping us safe. In fact, to the contrary. So look up globalzero.org if you have a chance. It's something I care about a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Plame. Thank you so much for doing this evening. Given all of your experiences, do you have any advice for someone who is interested in pursuing a career in the intelligence field? Or would you, in fact, dissuade someone from going into it, given everything you've been through?
I will tell you this, that my husband and I speak a lot across the country at universities, and we do get asked that a lot. And I always encourage young people to at least consider a career in public service. I think that we obviously have a lot of challenges, and we need the best and the brightest to consider that. It doesn't have to be the CIA, but there's so many ways to apply talents and to be engaged in our democracy in a way, because otherwise, well, as we're seeing right now with the whole NSA revelations and so forth, our leaders need to understand how we feel on certain issues. And so I would strongly encourage anyone you might know to think about a career in public service.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't too much of an anticlimax here, but it's continuing the same line of careers in the CIA. And I want to pick up on something that you seemed to be saying before. You were saying that until the 80s or even the 90s, it wasn't possible for professionals, sort of like yourself, to come into operations in the CIA. I'm sorry, professional women to come into operations, that it was a male bastion and so forth. You mentioned an exception. It was rare, presumably, but it sounded like it does occur or did occur, of a secretary or something who was good at her job, and that somehow that the CIA would allow for a sort of elevation of status or change of job and so forth. Is that real? And tell me more about that.
Yes, I think for women in the CIA that came in working in support capacities through the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, there are some great stories of women in espionage from Julia Child on down. But there was not, to my knowledge, a welcoming embrace for women in operations. But if you proved yourself and were the right place in the right time, like everything else, I mean, for those of you that know Mad Men, watch that. It's, get a coffee, and if you're really good at getting coffee, maybe we'll let you type, and
Yes, hi. Charlie Clark. I was wondering if you could comment on the confusion in some of the journalistic accounts of whether the leak of your identity was from Richard Armitage at State or whether it was from Scooter Libby and the host of others in the White House. And related to that is, why do you suppose your name had appeared apparently in a document that was circulating on Air Force One, that you were the wife of Joe Wilson?
So a couple things. It's really clear that what came out in the subsequent investigation was that there was several sources within ranking senior officials, both within the State Department and within the White House, including Richard Armitage, Karl Rove, and others, that were using my name rather freely. And I, to this day, do not really know how my name was passed. I was in covert status, although the narrative was, everyone knew who she was. And I have a neighbor, literally a next door neighbor who's here this evening, who will stand up and tell you that she had no idea until she read it in the Washington Post what that nice neighbor lady next door does. So, yeah, I mean, clearly, my husband had written that op-ed piece, What I Did Not Find in Africa. He was really one of the first of his stature and establishment to say, wait a minute, I believe that the administration has manipulated intelligence to encourage the American public to support the war in Iraq. And clearly the administration did not take criticism well. And they made a determination that the story would be about the ambassador and his wife who worked at the CIA, rather than, wait a minute, we didn't find WMD, and wait a minute, there is no imminent nuclear threat. Like we told you, remember, for those that are not so young here, how many times did we hear we don't want to see the smoking gun in the shape of a mushroom cloud, right? Here we are 10 years on. And we were told, and that is why there was an imminent nuclear threat, that's why we needed to go to war. And I was somewhat heartened, I guess, because when you kind of get a little bit dulled, if you flip around the TV stations and the reality TV, you think, oh, the civilization as we know it has come to an end. But what I want to say is that it was clear that on the Syria issue, that the American public was paying attention and sent a message loud and clear to our political leadership. We're really fatigued of these military adventures. And by the way, you haven't really given us a good idea of, as terrible as that was, I'm horrified of the photos that we saw. You haven't really given us an idea of what happens the day after Assad falls. And it was very clear that the leadership heard that, and Secretary Kerry says, oh, now everything was completely planned, and that he wanted to say those remarks that, the only thing he could do is give up all his chemical weapons, and Putin jumped all over that. I don't care how it happened, but it did. And so there is some hope for some progress.
Hi, my name is Diane. Thanks very much for answering so many questions. We all hear about government conspiracies, and recently the legendary journalist Seymour Hersh has called the killing of bin Laden, along with other people, have called it a hoax. Could you comment on that?
Did you all hear that? That Seymour Hersh, was it in the New Yorker? Yeah, I didn't read the article, but I just saw somewhere on my Twitter feed right after Laura Rozen's Twitter that Seymour Hersh had said it was a big lie. I don't know. I didn't read the article. I don't know what he's saying about that. He has done some amazing journalism in his career. He is someone to pay attention to, but I don't know what he said. So I just want to take a moment because I'm looking straight back at my very own senator from New Mexico, and I wanted to say thank you to Tom Udall for coming. And his beautiful wife, Jill. This is why I love living in New Mexico, because I get to have dinner with my senator and his wife, and when he's not wearing a tie, put it that way. Thank you for coming. Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering, in your opinion, is Snowden a villain, a hero, or something else?
Right. It's clear that when people ask me about that, I think they have a notion that I'm going to say right away, oh, what Snowden was terrible, and he's a traitor, and that it's damaging to national security. And Joe and I are watching this following it very closely. And in fact, we think it's, first of all, Snowden is irrelevant to this. It doesn't matter, as the media was following that like the shiny ball, you going from Hong Kong to Moscow and all of that. It doesn't matter. What is at stake is this issue and the dynamic between national security and privacy. And in fact, I'm preparing some remarks to give on that particular subject in a few weeks, so I've been doing a lot of homework, and I am increasingly concerned as the revelations continue to come out weekly now, practically, the extent, I mean, it's not like a big surprise, I can say, but the extent to which the NSA is deeply entwined in our communications. And I find it many Americans sort of, when this first came out, there was sort of a big shrug. I'm not a terrorist, right? I don't care. And we've become so acclimated to our privacy being eroded because, of course, we give it away. Anyone who on social media is aware of that. My kids today don't really have, I have 13-year-old twins, and they're beginning to become, understand Facebook and all of that, but I'm lurking. Don't worry, I'm lurking on Facebook. But so there's that, and then we have the corporate aspect of Amazon that says you bought these shoes, you will love these sandals, right? And so we're sheep-like in that way now. So I don't think there is a lot of thought about the potential consequences, the follow-on effect of, okay, something Joe and I know a lot about, political chicanery, using that information. What about overzealous prosecutor? Heaven forbid that our government moves toward tyranny. As Senator Frank Church said in 1975, before any of this even existed, but he saw the potential. He spoke about this abyss, right? If we go over, we cannot recover. And so it's really critical. I have to smile a little bit that President Obama said, "Oh, I welcome this conversation that we need to have." Right, which we never would have had if it had not been for Snowden, but about what is the right balance? How much are we willing to give up? And so far, many of our political leaders, with some exceptions, have said, "Oh, don't worry. Trust us. We're keeping you safe." And so it's been eclipsed recently because of all the other news that is out there. But this is an issue that is vitally important to our Fourth Amendment, who we are as a democracy, and what we want our government to, what is that balance? How much are we willing to give up to be safe?
Just ask a follow-up on that before, forgive me. But I am curious what you think about how much the Obama White House has gone after leakers, given after everything you'd gone through on the one hand, being a victim of a leak, but on the other hand, there were a lot of sort of politicized leak investigations during the Bush time, and it seems like it's become even more excessive under Obama.
It's very interesting. And the case a few months ago of the Justice Department that went after the AP records, which it appears to have been sort of a big fishing operation, right? If you troll and drag the net enough, something's bound to come up. I don't know. I don't live in Washington to follow all the ins and outs of but it's clear that this administration has made that determination that they are going to crack down on this. And having been the victim of a leak, ironically, from the administration for which I was working at the time, again, it has to be done on a case-by-case basis, and not all leaks are equal. I know that's kind of wishy-washy, but that's what I think.
Hello, good evening, Ms. Plame. Since we broke the seal on the bin Laden affair, and as you discussed earlier, we all know the operations community is very limited, very small, and in the female operators, even smaller. I'm just curious if you ever got a chance or opportunity to cross paths with or develop a relationship with Jennifer Matthews for her demise in 2009.
Yeah, Jennifer Matthews and her colleague Elizabeth Hansen, thank you. They were two female operations officers at a base in Khost, Afghanistan, that were tragically killed in December, I think, 2011. I knew both of them, and they were fabulous officers, very dedicated. There's a good book, which you can probably find here, called Triple Agent, by a Washington Post writer who took time off and explored how that came about. And it's really as you can see, it's a cascade of events and of mistakes that were made that led to that suicide bombing. It was a Jordanian agent that by day was helping women and children as a doctor in refugees camp, and then would go home at night and get online and became increasingly radicalized. Is really tragic. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Have you considered running for public office?
I've had enough of politics.
You told the New York Times the other day, what is the profile of what makes the CIA looks for in a good case officer? It's like something. It was very interesting.
Right. So is anyone familiar with that test? Is it Myers-Briggs or Briggs-Myers? Yeah, that one. Yeah. So apparently what they are looking for is something called an ENTJ, extrovert, intuitive, thinking, judgmental, which doesn't exactly track what you think those words mean, but it puts you in a category. And I guess it's a small percentage of the population. But if anyone in this room is in fact a covert operations officer, you know, when they get a bunch of them in a room, the din and the egos are overpowering, but always interesting. But I think the most important skill in operations is a genuine curiosity about others. Everyone in this room has a really interesting story to tell. And if you had access to intelligence, maybe someone would sidle up to you and ask you about your story. But it's that, honestly, I'm being a little facetious there, but it's a curiosity in other people that's I love my job because there is always something to learn and a place to go and to figure it out and to be able to work on the things I worked with proliferation was really satisfying.
All right. We can just wrap it up there. Thank you to Laura and thank you to Valerie. Thank you all for coming.